Welcome to Vibe Check, a place where we have open, honest, and authentic conversations about the human side of business. Our goal is to help you achieve better business outcomes with people-led initiatives. And to get there, there is only room for real talk and genuine advice. No sugarcoating here. It's not allowed. So, what is a vibe check? Well, it's a phrase for asking how you're doing really. It opens the door to meaningful conversations between colleagues, professionals, but most importantly, human beings. My name is Jeannotte, or JJ for short, and I'll be your host for this series. My mission in life is to help organizations understand the value of placing their people at the heart of their strategy and their business. And that's exactly what you can expect from Vibe Check Chats. Let's dive right into it. So our guest today is Emilie Salvi. Emilie, welcome to Vibe Check.
Hello, thank you, JJ. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. So, as means of introduction, Emilie is a learning and development professional and a certified career educator. She has experience in the tech industry, and she is also most recently the founder of Bureau Community, a job search and career coaching service. Ooh, exciting. Having developed successful educational programs in nonprofit, academia, and tech fields, she is passionate about learning and its endless potential to positively transform ourselves as candidates, employees, and employers, building together thriving working environments. Woof, that's like such an inspiring mission, Emilie. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And
Thank
go
you
ahead.
so much for being with us.
I feel really delighted to be here at Vibe Check. Having open conversations these days feels like the thing that we must be doing. So thanks for having me.
Oh, I agree. That's such a beautiful addition to the introduction. Thank you for doing that. All right. So I want to hear a little bit about you, and I'm sure the audience does too. Can you introduce yourself? Like, we've read your bio, but that doesn't tell us all of what Emilie is. Who are you personally?
Ooh, that's a big question. But I would love to start with you just sharing that the reason why I'm so happy to be here at Vibe Check is because the whole purpose of Vibe Check, of having these authentic conversations, is really about connecting with people. And I love that. I feel like that's a big part of who I am. Connecting with others and belonging are such basic human needs that are essential just to be our best selves, let alone like not just professionally, but personally. So what a great approach to even get to know how business can be more human and thrive than to have these kinds of initiatives. For myself, I feel that one of my biggest values are really connection and belonging. It's really that thread that ties my personal, my professional values. And one of my favorite researchers, and I know a super popular one, Brené Brown, talks about that, the idea of belonging as that desire to be part of something that's larger than us, that's more than fitting in and asking for approval. It's really about being yourself, being authentically yourself, as imperfect as it is, we're all that, and accepting yourself as who you are. So it feels good to be here and to do something that's along to my values.
Did you sneak into my brain? It feels like it's me talking. I was like, my God, I could actually literally be saying the exact same thing you're saying. I feel like we're spiritual twins. I believe in all of the things that you mentioned, and I think that's actually what drove us to have you as a guest on Vibe Check. That's immediately whomever would meet you for the first time and have you around as a friend or as a coworker or as a partner would obviously know all of these things about you being so true. It transpires the moment we meet you. So I think that's amazing. Thank you for bringing that to the conversation, because I think it's much needed in many conversations revolving around the world of work. I feel my mouth is full of words.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have to say, and it feels like, there's a great alignment between us, and I'm really happy we're having this conversation. It's really well needed, like you said.
I can't wait for it. So let's set the table for it and do what we do for every episode of Vibe Check. We start with a vibe check. So how are you doing, really?
Oh, well, I'm really, as mentioned, like I'm really delighted to have this kind of conversation. This is really something that not just personally, but I feel the workplace has been needing to have these kinds of conversations to understand how to work. So it feels good to have a bit more, to have a space to have this kind of conversation.
Truly.
How are you doing?
I am doing great. I mean, I won't lie. Today is a Friday, so I'm a little bit tired. It's been somewhat of a stressful morning. But yeah, I'm excited. I was happy that the sun was out this morning. That always brings me a lot of energy. And now I'm a little bit sad because I'm seeing it going away and I think it's going to rain soon. As you can tell, the weather has a big influence on my mood.
Totally. Same here. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
the same. But honestly, to be frank, these conversations, every time we record one of these episodes, brings me so much energy. So that, all of the rest is kind of like secondary. I'm motivated by the conversation and having the chance to talk with someone who's equally, if not even more excited about the conversation, which is what I'm sensing from you. Like, this is the vibe I get.
It really is. Yes.
Great. Okay, so let's dive into our topic. Now that the vibe check is checked. So I want to start really our conversation around just defining what employee growth is, because I feel there are many definitions to this, and why we're having you as a guest is because we want to hear your perspective. So let's start by doing that, defining that topic. What is your personal definition of employee/professional growth, Emilie?
Yeah, so I think that employee professional growth has to do with, I think of a journey when we talk about that, because it's really filled with, it's kind of like a venture that an employee goes through, filled with uncertainty of figuring out how to move ahead to the next step. So when an employee is on a journey, it's filled with those ups and downs and facing challenges on learning company culture, learning their role, feeling accomplished when they're going through, when they achieve, the outcome of a project. Yeah. Receiving feedback, going through conflict, mastering your role, then going back to boredom. It's a whole series of ups and downs, and I feel that I see it as a journey. And I also think about career growth very much. I think employee growth has to do with the career growth that is all about like looking at the bigger picture, like understanding what is the long-term process of where the employee would like to go. What does it look like? Is it leading a team? Is it leading a company? Is it actually just leading yourself and surpassing your own challenges, or transitioning careers? So I feel these are kind of the components. That's what I think about when I think of employee growth. And lastly, it's the employee growth in the workplace. It's about progress, whatever that is. So usually progress of skills, of knowledge, abilities, really potential, both personally and professionally. So growth opportunities, I see them as not just one-dimensional, but many different ways to cultivate new skills, new competencies, through training, coaching, mentorship, networking. There's many different ways that growth can be fostered. And so I look at those three pieces when I think of employee growth.
I think you're right. And something in your answer really stuck with me. And I want to pull at it if you don't mind.
Yeah,
You said,
go for it.
Talking about it as a journey and something you go through and kind of the roller coaster ride, that is that journey and that adventure. And you said going back to boredom. And that kind of sparked something in me in the sense that, of course, growth is not a linear thing, right? You're gonna have ups where you're like, oh my God, like I'm progressive, I'm progressing, I'm becoming who I wanted to be, I'm developing and mastering a new skill. It feels great. I feel we often talk about the positive side of growth, but we don't often talk about moments of boredom and moments where you're doubting if that's the right direction and you're seeking advice from coaches or mentor or co-workers. But I feel there's also room to acknowledge the power of these moments that are tougher, that are boring, that you're like, oh, I've had enough of this role. I feel I'm on autopilot. I feel a computer could be doing my job. I don't know what's next. And I feel it's easy to drown sometimes in these moments and lose focus of the destination, which you also touched on. What's the destination you want to reach? And that's a journey, right? Just like life in general. And making room to acknowledge that not every moment will be great. Some moments will be not awesome, but they'll serve a purpose in the wider journey. What do you think?
I'm so happy you picked up on that. That's so true. Boredom is not, I mean, every part of the journey, it serves as really a learning opportunity, you know, like those moments, even the less sexier moments, like boredom means something. Yeah, it means something. That, yeah. And go and tuning into that, understanding that you are on that, you're feeling that, is actually completely natural. People often think that, okay, time to automatically change company, actually look for a new job. But sometimes it could mean, I mean, that could be the case, absolutely. But sometimes even before that, it could mean actually just tuning into yourself. What do you need to get out of that? What can you learn? What could be the new challenge that you can give yourself within your own role? Could it be a change, or could it be a change of role within the company? Having a conversation with your manager, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I'm happy that you tune into that, and also the idea that the idea of failure, of learning through our failures, is such a big one. And that's also our journey of growing, is that once we tune into what are those failures, what did we do wrong? Why is that wrong? And actually acknowledging it, speaking, knowing how to talk about it and moving ahead are huge learning opportunities that actually are pivoting moments in your employee journey and career. So yeah, I'm happy you picked up on that for sure.
Could not agree more. And at the end of the day, what we're saying is it's a question of mindset, right? How you're able to go through these moments and see these moments, and how you decide to handle them is a question of mindset. And there's a great book, I think I had it here, but I moved it. It was Mindset by Carol Dweck. And she you know, of course, you know, but it's a question of mindset. And those moments where it's not so great, or moments of boredom, sometimes it's worth actually going through those things, because it makes you realize what you want, how you want to be. It's all, looking at it is a question of mindset. And if you have that growth mindset, you acknowledge that these moments are actually worth it.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. This is already so rich. So thank you. I feel we could probably run with that for like hour.
For sure. We could talk about that for 3 hours, surely.
Okay, so let's break this down, because I feel that was a great definition. You brought in so many different aspects of learning and development. What do you feel are the different components of employee growth, so we can break it down a little bit for the audience listening?
Okay, so when talking about employee growth, I feel that really understanding what is your direction, you know, start understanding that there's different types of growth within the workplace, and it's not necessarily always vertical, but there's different types of growth. And I feel before even talking about the different routes and all of that, a core one is understanding your personal growth, as I feel that serves as a foundation to all different types of growth types. And it's a type of growth that involves when an employee develops their personal skills, like base skills that are going to be fundamental for every type of movement, communication, managing your time, your projects, yourself, problem solving, with conflict, managing, you know, like work-related responsibilities and personal life. This type of growth can really help employees with their overall sense of performance, satisfaction, and become even more valuable to whatever organization that they're serving. So I would start off with the personal growth as a main one, as a foundation. And then I would say for other types of growth, often we talk about, that vertical growth, which involves like progression of an employee from a lower level, moving on to a higher level position within the same organization. But there could also be other types, like horizontal growth. So a type that when an employee acquires new skills and is growing within their existing role, which is highly valuable. Not everybody necessarily wants to move on exactly to a higher senior management role. It could be growing within your current role, and that is valuable in itself, like develop project management or leadership or public speaking skills. There's lateral type of growth, where this type of growth is about an employee moving from one department or another within the same organization. And then more of a diagonal growth type, moving from a completely different role, different department, not directly related to your current role, which allows you to apply, again, your existing skills and knowledge in a completely new context. So learning completely new skill sets as well. And I feel that any kind of growth, whether that's vertical or diagonal or whatever whatever direction that goes, it requires learning something new. That's something I'd love to talk a little bit more about too.
Oh my God, if you want to talk about it now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever type of growth, I can't help but see this over and over, is that people are often wanting to think that because they're bored, they want that senior management position that's going to solve their problems. But then that doesn't necessarily actually satisfy them. And I think that a big key to any kind of something to keep in mind with any kind of direction that you'd like to go is that keep in mind, what kind of learning do you want to take from this? Because learning is at the core of any kind of transition that you're doing in wherever you're going. So my own training I have a master's in educational studies, I focus on adult education, and I'm a big proponent of really embracing adult learning throughout your career, just wherever that is, whatever route you go in your career. So a couple of things that I find exciting when you are learning as an adult, and something to keep in mind wherever you go, is that either way, whatever direction you take, learning is actually good for your own mental health and happiness. And I'm fascinated by the fact that there's tons of studies that show this. There's a direct correlation between learning and mental health. So whatever way you take in your career, if you keep on learning, you have a greater sense, it's proven, greater sense of identity. You have a greater sense of purpose and of overall happiness. And I find that fascinating.
It is fascinating because those are also highly important levers of employee engagement, which is what we measure at Office Vibe, right? So all of this rings so logical, right? And there's no wonder we're putting so much emphasis on employee growth. Personal growth is one of the biggest drivers of engagement. And so of course you feel great. Of course you're going to be someone who's more committed to your mission personally, but also the mission of your organization, and you're going to be a more positive contributor. We'll come back to that later. What I also love that you talked about that because it's so important, and it's such a big portion of life, and having ways where you can foster that mental health after everything we've been through, we all know, in the last couple of years. And that growth and seeing life and work as a constant provider of learning opportunities is great. It really is. The world needs that. Love the fact that you touched on something that you broke the myth, because so many people believe that the only way to grow professionally is to become a manager. And I think it's about time that we talk about that properly and say, it's okay. One should and can become a people manager. Some people are born, leaders and make great people managers. Sometimes some people go into that route, and they should explore it, of course, and learn quickly that maybe it's not for them, and that's okay. It's not the only way to go. How did you call it? There's diagonal. Oh my God, please say that for me in English.
Diagonal.
Diagonal growth, lateral growth, growing into your existing role, taking your current skills, applying them into a completely different portion of the business. The routes are really endless, right?
Absolutely. No, really. And whatever you end up doing is, whatever direction they're taking, is just knowing that what you're learning on your during your role and what you decide to learn outside of your role is actually supporting you in every area of your life. Like you're being supported in your professionally, it's going to be helping you with your own career, but also the act of keeping of learning and learning stuff that you're interested in and curious by. You're helping yourself personally. It's good for your mental health, for your social connections, for interpersonal skills. The benefits are pretty wild. So I'm excited. I know I'm going on and on about learning, but I think that it's a big key factor in employee motivation these days, where people feel that they're looking for the next best thing all the time. And sometimes you maybe need to learn a little bit more about yourself, or how you can learn about your role or your career, a little bit more about your industry, perhaps.
You're right. It's important not to get lost, right? I feel there's a balance that needs to be to be made here, where it's not always a good thing to jump around whenever you're bored or whenever you wonder what the next thing to do is. It's valuable to take a moment and think about where you're going, what matters to you, in what ways do you want to learn and develop and grow, and take a moment to make those decisions wisely, right? And think about the overall plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an organization, looking at how can employees be more engaged? Working in whatever talent role or HR role, what are specific strategies or initiatives that could really light up employees and motivate them to really bring about their best version? And there's so many different ways that managers can bring about that and organizations can support that. But I would say having things like a clear career development path, have clear learning opportunities within an organization to show employees, hey, by the way, we support you. We want to support you in developing your skills, your knowledge. We want to support your growth, whatever that is, making sure that's clear in the organization so that people know that they have that support system there. And in fact, that leads to people's increased satisfaction, motivation, Office Vibe knows all this, productivity, all of this, and organizational objectives as well.
Yeah, and it avoids rash decisions of saying like, I think I'm pretty much done. I've done everything I can do. It's been a year. Let me move on to somewhere else. If you don't have that visibility, you don't get that visibility as to options in which employees have to grow within your organization. Well, no wonder they're just going to go, right? They don't have the information. They're just going to make the decision based on that. Whereas you probably have, even if it's not formalized,
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious to hear you on when or why a person would aim to grow vertically, and when a horizontal move makes more sense. Like, are there indicators for that decision?
I really think it depends on what the employees, like, what's your goal? What are you looking to achieve? And sometimes that's not so clear, and that's okay, because there's so many changing factors these days. But when we talk about employee growth, we often refer to career ladders that are more traditional. Like when an employee wants to develop and progress within an organization, they have ladders that are set up. So an employee knows what that progression looks like. But there's also career paths that involve a variety of, like, what does that look like in terms of career progression? There's horizontal growth, growth outside of the person's, like an employee's team. And I think when an employee gets to know what their goals are, they're better capable to navigate, to have that conversation with their manager. And on the other way around, managers are better equipped to have those conversations when they know from on an organizational level what they can do to support their teams. So I would see it as both ways, like really having a clear idea of understanding for employees understanding what direction do they want to take. Do they want to move within their role, or do they want to move vertically, or what is their direction, and having a space where they can actually have that conversation with their manager. And on the other side, managers actually knowing where to take the conversation.
That's a perfect segue for what I wanted us to talk about next. Really talking about everyone's role in a person's professional development. I'd love to start by the obvious. What's the employee's role in their own growth? What do you feel is their responsibility or their part in that?
Yeah, I feel, as we were talking about before, the career growth is really a journey,
Mhm.
and to work on that, to get on that journey, understanding your sense of purpose as an employee, getting clear as, I would go even before that, as a person, and then finding that match in your role in the organization. What is your purpose in your role, and how can you create opportunities for yourself? And those opportunities differ from employee to employee, as we were talking about. Sometimes that means senior management role. Other times that means growth within your current role.
Becoming an expert in your role.
Yeah, yeah. But considering what kind of learning for you as an employee can help you grow in your current role. What are the resources that you need? What's available in your organization? Are you looking for the next in your role, in your team, in your department, outside your department? What does that transition look like? Have
Mhm.
that in mind. Oftentimes employees think that if they don't, they rely on managers to understand that, but it is not so clear. Management is so overloaded these days with so many changes happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely so being clear with having a clear target in mind and knowing how to communicate that with your manager is key. And then knowing, once you speak about it with your manager, how can you achieve those goals, and how are those goals, and showcasing how are those goals actually aligned to the organization's business objectives. Because as much as organizations want to cultivate learning, the reality is that there's business objectives that are still happening within an organization, and that you want to make sure that you're showcasing that within the organization, how that growth is going to be bringing that forward. So if there's no internal resources that are available at the moment, make sure, take charge of your own learning. Don't just forget about it and go on and like other things that, or even, it's easy to feel kind of resentful about that, but
Yes.
sometimes there's other things going on. And my main point is that you want to take charge of your learning, and you want to seek out workshops, conferences, networking events, virtual, in person. There's tons of opportunities to
Shadowing
connect.
others.
Shadowing.
Even. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Within your organization, shadowing, mentorship within your organization, and then looking outside, LinkedIn groups, connecting with other professionals, learning through what resources are they tapping into. Slack communities is absolutely amazing too.
Those are
So
huge.
don't forget, yeah. So don't forget, there's tons of resources available. If you feel that your organization maybe isn't ready to have that, to showcase, or isn't set up for that, make sure that you seek that out.
I love the fact that you brought up the point that you have to also be capable as an employee in showing, okay, this is where I want to grow, this is what I want to do, but then making sure that you tie that back to team goals or organizational goals, to that vision of the organization. You have to what you want to do personally and professionally for yourself is also a benefit for your organization, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a business, right? There's a contract here. And yes, it's about you growing, because that's important for your engagement and for being a really high performing employee. But there's a context in which you're doing that. And that's a context of a business, right? And so for long, like we've seen, there was a while where we saw that organizations investing in this in a way where it's like, it becomes this happy place where employees kind of make up roles and do whatever they want, grow in ways that don't necessarily make sense for the business. And that's not what it's about, right? So having the power to connect that to, here's what's in it for me, but here's what's in it for you as an organization will increase the chances that the organization will say yes to you going into that conference, yes to you shadowing that employee or exploring different ways to apply your skills or your strengths. Showing that connection to the business is really key. And it's often something that maybe some workers can forget about sometimes. And that reduces their chances of getting support from their manager and organization and developing themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you really you nailed that one. Yeah,
You brought it
getting
on.
yeah.
And I completely echo everything that you said about the employee's responsibility. Now, like let's explore together the responsibilities of the manager. How can they help their employees foster their own growth? What's their role?
Yeah, so I think as a manager, knowing what resources are in place and what are the processes that the organization has,
Right.
and if they don't have any, to advocate for them. I think a manager really needs to find out how to support their employees, essentially, in one way or another, with resources or with whether those resources are there or not. And I think just generally today, a good core of just management, I feel at the core of that is coaching. Knowing how to coach your team member is such a key leadership skill needed for managers today, with the fast pace of industry, so many industry changes and technology that is really changing the importance of what are the newest skills that you need to have. Managers need to support their teams in learning and growing regularly. That's a given. And knowing how to coach your team in the way that you interact with them either on a daily or weekly or monthly is important. And I don't mean once a year, I really mean on a regular basis. If you can level with your team member, understand what your team members understand what are the issues that they may be facing in their roles, be sensitive to possibly like opposing perspectives. That's completely natural. You'll be far better equipped to support your team members to overcome real barriers and to work together as a team. So I feel that coaching aspect is such a key part of knowing how to support your team in their roles and finding out as a manager what resources are available, what processes are there, how can you make it, and if there aren't, how can you make it happen?
Yeah. So really knowing the structure, what's in place, and a close relationship and discussion with the HR team is really important here. You have to know what programs are available. What's the organization's philosophy on this? What are the processes that support that? What is performance management, progression management? So being aware of that and being the conduit for that information to your employees is one of your roles as a manager. Yes. And then I heard a lot of ongoing discussions, and I'm guessing you're thinking one-on-ones, utilizing managers' best tools to have those discussions. And I loved you said confronting those points of views, get to know your employee, what to them, where they want to grow, how they want to grow. And I feel there's so much room to use those discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. And this gets made on purpose, but it's not. But no. I was using Office Vibe before, and it is an incredibly amazing tool to structure those conversations. I personally have benefited from that. And having those tools in place are key. Yeah. Something I forgot to mention about the coaching part is that as a manager, coaching, as many managers notice, it's not a one-size-fits-all process. It's really so key to tailor your focus to the team, to your team. And everyone is different. Every team member brings something that's unique to the team. So your job as a manager is to find out what are those strengths. How can you support them in developing those skills with a tailored plan? There's, of course, always aligning it to business goals, but understanding that your team is not all the same, and that's actually a good thing. So when people are when people use their strengths, I read something along the lines of when people are using their strengths every day, they are 6 times more likely to be engaged. Can you imagine that?
It's crazy. It's just crazy. And I've seen many managers just skip on that part. I guess some of them assume that they know the strengths of their employees. Not many take the time to actually talk about them with their employees and say, like, how do you see this strength? How do you see being used? Give me examples of where you've applied the skill. And then the manager goes, I've seen you apply this skill or develop this skill or hone in on it in this scenario, that scenario. Just there's so much power in having those discussions between manager and employee. That made me think of speaking of Office Vibe. So we did, I don't know if you saw this, there's this Vibe magazine. This is the first edition of our Vibe magazine. The second one is coming up and I'm so excited. It's so good. But in there,
I haven't read it, but I would really love to.
And I'll bring a copy to you, since we're both in Montreal, you know? But in there was a
Amazing.
section where we did predictions, right? For
Hmm.
2023. And yeah, we were taking a look ahead at what's in store for you and your managers and your team for 2023. And this edition of the magazine was talking specifically to managers. We were giving advice. And the Pisces horoscope, because it was kind of built like a horoscope, right? And
I love that.
me too. I know, it's like just so fun. And there was one prediction that was about 2023 being a moment to really hone in on employee introspection. And I'll read the prediction to you. It says, "Gone are the days of manager-led people development. Stick to guiding, coaching, and removing blockers as a manager, but leave the most important growth thinking to your team themselves. You can only go as far as your employees' introspection." And I feel that's such a great way, and tell me what you think, of like recapping what we've talked about for what's the role of the employee and the role of the manager. And I've heard a great manager. I love her so much. She's probably going to be listening, and she knows who she is. And she said this once. She said, "JJ, I mean, I get all sorts of things. And speaking to your point, everyone on my team is so different, right? Whenever it comes to time of doing an annual review, and there's time, for the employee to kind of introspect on where they want to go and what they've accomplished and what's next for them." She said, "I get a member of my team coming back with like a novel, like so many points that I did that. I think this is a strength and I could be using it that way." You can really tell that the employee somehow probably found great questions in doing that introspection, actually dedicated the time to doing it properly. Whereas another member of the team will just come back with like 3 bullet points that you don't even know what that means. It says training that. Like, but why? Why do you want to pursue that? Because it's going to develop that strength, or because, you see something coming up next year? Long story short, you can only go as far as your employee is capable of doing that introspection. And if they can't, your job as a manager is to help them, prompt them with the right questions so that they're able to do that introspection. And then your job as a manager can really be about coaching these people. Anyways, that was long. What do you think?
I feel that yeah, I completely agree. And I was going to say that one of the key points when managers should coach their team members in figuring out the direction that they want to take in their career, one of the points I wanted to mention is actually exactly that: intrinsic motivation, understanding what are they curious to learn about and how can that positively impact their role and the organization's bottom line. I find that's key. Showing support from leadership too, really understanding what can employees, if employees are too scared to take the time to go out and learn, how can leadership really establish and communicate their commitment to their learning? And yeah, there's tons of pieces there to coaching advice for managers. I love that you mentioned the intrinsic motivation. It's probably the key. I read somewhere that intrinsic motivation is probably the common thread that ties what motivates employees from all different generations, from anywhere from baby boomers to generation Y and Z. So yeah, it's pretty impressive.
You're right. And anyone who's curious about this can go look up on Google self-determination theory.
Okay.
You'll have hours of reading around that, but that's pretty much the gist of what this research and theory talks about. It's really interesting. And
I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah. Cool. And so I feel we've shared like so many tips and tricks and tools, and I want to sum that part up a little bit by asking you, what would be your best coaching advice for managers?
So I think I know there's so many pieces there for best coaching advice for managers, and there's so much that needs to be part of it, but I really think it goes back to understanding your team. And you mentioned that, understanding your employees' intrinsic motivations. I really do believe in that. But as a manager, knowing how to navigate, how to ask the right questions and how to navigate these conversations with your different team members is so key. And knowing how you can promote learning and growth opportunities for everyone, and that looks different for every team member, is also equally important. So I think that for managers, when it comes to coaching their teams, understanding your team properly, I cannot emphasize that enough. And actually, there's amazing tools out there. There's obviously the amazing Office Vibe templates that I've benefited from highly, really. And I know that there's other great tools that are developed to really, if for managers who maybe struggle with, or first-time managers are struggling with getting to know their team, and getting to know them even outside of work a little bit, to get to know, to understand what motivates them, what demotivates them, how they can zone in on really their strengths, and really take the best of them. There's actually great tools out there that are designed to support managers for that. So I really encourage that managers to take advantage of these great tools, and know that if there are no processes in place in your organization, you can always be an advocate as a manager to how you can have these conversations and actually create something for your team, create learning and growth opportunities for your team.
I agree. You bringing back to what I say all the time. There's so much power in asking questions, and there's even more power in asking the right questions. And I'm biased because I'm heavily behind the templates that we have into Office Vibe, and this is my passion. I love writing questions, and this is why I was hired to work at Office Vibe. But I really love figuring out what the best way to ask a question is to drive the most meaningful conversation. And yeah, like I said, of course, I'm biased, but I feel that recognition and feedback is really a great way for managers to understand and figure out what their employees' strengths are about. Of course, there's a lot of power in discussing that in your one-on-one with your employees. But one of the things that we saw being born from Good Vibes, which is our recognition engine in Office Vibe, which I know you know about.
I love it.
I feel like that's like the shared feeling for everyone who knows Good Vibes. I hope it is. It was really meant to be a feature that creates something very positive in terms of impact, both for the people receiving it and giving it. But I've seen so many feedback and stories of people saying, I've used this as a manager to actually understand who my employees are, what matters to them, and what they're great about. And so, you know how these cards that you send as Good Vibes are linked to different categories and different themes that come by default, but the organization also has the opportunity to create their own cards, whether that's how their values translate into behavior. Those little cards, but also taking a moment to analyze what the team member sending that good vibe is saying about your employee, really looking at all of the cards that your team member has sent. That will give you a great indication of what motivates them and what's important for them at work, right? What drives them? Is it the quality of the relationship that they have with their team members, seeing the impact that they've had, or their work has had on their clients, or on the product, whatever the drivers, but also what they're receiving recognition for. What are they valued by their team members for? Is it because they're a team player? Is it because they show up? Is it because they take a moment to brighten someone's day? And those are really key in identifying strengths and then having a conversation with your employee as to saying, like, what's the best project or role or added responsibility we could give to you so that we can make that strength shine. But I've seen them used like amazingly. There was one story.
Go ahead. No. I was just going to say absolutely. Yeah, I know. I see the value in the Good Vibes, and I didn't want to cut you off with your. Go ahead with the story.
Oh no, it's all good. It was actually one of our clients. We did a vibe check episode with. She wrote me an email. She said, "Look at this, Julie. it's time for annual review. And we get this guy on one of our tech teams, very silent. He's not one to, chat a lot and give a lot of wording around his personal evaluation for the year. And there was one question in the review that says, give a concrete example of how you've demonstrated this company value that we have in the last year. What the employee did, they looked up at all of their good vibes and said, I've looked at my good vibes, and over the course of last year, I was recognized this many times for this value. And I've gotten this kind of feedback showing that concretely I've applied this company value in the way I do my work and collaborate with other people. And here are like little snippets of the good vibes that I've gotten to support that with concrete examples. It made my heart melt completely. It's like, how great is that? What better proof?
Yeah, because I'm so happy that you bring that up, and the whole initiative of good vibes, it's really, I see it as also good for those, it's so valuable for those who don't know how to talk about or how to even recognize their strengths. I find there's so many aspects about this initiative, this feature that is so well done, and it's designed for the, and yeah, there are so many more maybe introverts who are not able to recognize that, or not necessarily introverts, but just personality types who aren't able to recognize what those strengths look like and how they make an impact. So I find it an amazing tool to tap into that, and that's such a beautiful example of the impact of that.
It is. I think it brings back the added lesson here that you're not alone in figuring this out. A lot of people think that this is going on in my head, that I have to be making those decisions alone. Oh my God, you don't. Leverage your partner, leverage your friends, leverage your coworkers in figuring out what your path is. You're not alone in employee growth, right? And we should absolutely value that. And what we've been talking about is a great example of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Others can help figuring out what your strengths are and making you understand what you do really well and where you do have an impact.
Oh, absolutely. And going back to the original question of what is the advice for managers, and not being alone, really advocating for learning together, advocating for a team approach to employee learning to really promote that unity in the team, continued application of skills and knowledge sharing, actually promoting that, encouraging for employees to share, whoever has a strength in whatever skill, maybe it's a public speaking skill, who can encourage another employee to really showcase that and to practice that in a safe space. New habits are much more likely to stick when a team is working together, and we know this. And so it promotes really team commitment and engagement. And yeah, absolutely, learning together and when you're in it together as a team is so key.
I agree. That could be the subtitle for the episode: learning together.
Yeah, very true.
There's this question that's been like sitting here. We've been talking about employee growth for like, I don't know how long now. I want to ask the why question. Why do employees crave learning and development opportunities now more than ever before? What's your take on this?
I think now more than ever, employees really are looking for opportunities to grow, and they're looking for a better work-life. Along with that, they're looking for a better work-life balance, greater flexibility, and learning and development initiatives are no longer about just improving those professional skills, but it's also about developing really both the personal and professional learning.
The whole self.
Have more of a holistic view of learning. Employees are craving that, and they're looking for opportunities to develop top skills, which have to do with leadership, with interpersonal communication, or I like to call often those power skills, no longer the soft skills. the conflict resolution or habits or behavior change skills that are really transforming employees within their role across if they're ready for an internal mobility in the organization or for a career change. These are key skills that are really going to drive your growth, and employees are seeking that. They're hungry to grow more than ever, and in fact there's time we see this over and over again. If you're in the HR or business leader in an organization, that employees' number one reason to join, or number one or top two reasons to join and reason to leave an organization is because of career opportunities. There are career opportunities, or there's a lack of career opportunities, and tied to that is learning.
Absolutely. What brought this on? Why do you think it's changed? Like we talked about, different generations going through different phases of the world of work. Do you think there's a driver for that being important now than, versus before, even a decade ago? What's made this change, you think?
I find that such a good question. I mean, it's become more important now than ever that people are recognizing they're spending so many hours in the workplace, and they want to make sure that the workplace is really cultivating. People are realizing more than ever that they want to make sure that the workplace is cultivating themselves as people beyond the employees, since it takes so much of their time. Yeah. It's is a big part of their life. And I think that a big one, that why it's become such a common one and why so many people are talking about it, is if we look at Gen Z, so they're also known as the Zoomers, yeah, born around 97 to 2012. They're our newest generation of the workforce, and they care about companies that are socially inclined, that care about sustainability, climate change, hunger, social issues. What else are they curious about? Well, they often are very curious about constantly learning and experimenting in order to grow, mm-hmm, and to progress. I think they care less about immediate perfection, but more about just learning new skills. I think it also has to do with the change, such a fast pace of our industries that are changing so quickly. They're born into that, mm-hmm, and along with that, and their sense of, their crave for purpose is understanding who can support them in their growth, who can make sure that they're getting closer to their purpose, and that they're constantly learning and growing. Yeah. So I think that they have a big, that could be a reason to that. And I feel that organizations need to respond to that. If they aren't already, they need to structure that employee learning and growth with growth plans, with policies that can support that, so that employees are really driving their career growth, but they're also being supported by the right leaders in the organization to make sure that they're making that meaningful change, that meaningful growth in their organization.
I think you're right. There's so many good elements in what you shared there. And I think that's exactly it. The world is evolving. The context is evolving, of course. And we're seeing a shift where work isn't just work. Work is a part of the rest of your life, right? Similar to this concept of bringing your whole self to work. There's no longer a dissociation, and work becomes one of the things that brings you fulfillment. And you alluded to work-life balance being such a big priority. I think the shift to remote work also was a big trigger in people re-examining the place that work had into their lives. We studied this in 2021, about a year and a half into the pandemic. And that was one of the main things that came out. People realized that in many cases, work was the center of their existence. And they've shifted to saying, I want a holistic approach to all of this. And to your point, work is one of the ways where I can grow as a person. So if I'm spending that many hours at work, it has to be worth it for many, many reasons. Yes, for the organization I work for and the cause or the purpose that we want to serve in society, in the world. But it also has to be a place where I become who I want to become and I continuously grow, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up such a good point. Exactly. During the pandemic, there's been so many career transitions. People are had major reality checks about what direction they want to go, and they realize either their current career is not for them or they need a role change. Whatever it is, they need a change. They need to grow in the right direction. And as humans, let's face it, we know that when we get out of our comfort zones, we show ourselves that we're capable of growth. We are resilient, and that's good for our well-being. It's even proven. There's tons of research on that, and we've all gone through it ourselves. So yeah, I think that putting that career growth at the forefront for organizations matters. And we know that a lack of opportunities, a lack of career advancements for within an organization are one of the top reasons people are quitting. So,
Exactly.
it's a priority. It needs to be a priority for organizations if it isn't already.
Well, you said it, seeing that it's so part and key in the employee experience. What would be any advice you would have to share with HR teams around learning and development?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely tons of, I guess there's so many great pieces that have been shared today, but I think whatever happens is that HR needs to integrate learning, trainings, processes, policies as adopted in the organization, and it needs to be really enforced top down. You can have best managers who are the most motivated, energized, and are all for coaching their teams. But if they're not supported by really the top structures of the organization's policies, if there are no learning policies in place, the learning will only go so far, and growth will not be able to, like, it won't evolve. So I think that we've seen it over and over again where HR really needs to support those structures, those career paths, those resources for managers, the support for managers to know how to manage and how to lead, how to support their teams. We know that it already impacts satisfaction, motivation, productivity. We need to make sure that it's set in place from an HR perspective.
Yeah. Have you seen what stories or examples have you seen in your experience of employee growth done right? Anything that comes to mind?
I can speak of, I mean, there's tons of examples, and I know that where a previous employer where I was working at, Amelia, it was an amazing place for onboarding, where employees would really get to know what the organization was all about through a welcome session. It was an in-person welcome sessions, through a structured onboarding. So all sorts of resources that were provided on an HR level, but also managers that would support their teams, be present on their first day, and all sorts of processes that were integrated in their onboarding, which was really, really nice. And for me personally, when I went through that, I thought I honestly felt so welcomed, knowing that you are starting on the right foot in an organization that took care of your first, is making sure that you're feeling welcome. There's nothing like that, and we know that when we spend time on onboarding, it dramatically impacts an employee's experience. So I find that's one example that impacted me for the best. I have another one.
Yeah, share it. Yes.
And I'm thinking about leadership and how employee growth is always supported when you have that support of your leader. I think a big one more than ever these days is having leaders that know how to recognize, and we spoke about that before, the skill set of employees, but also how to encourage your employees when they lack that confidence.
Yeah.
And at times that could be intimidating because you don't want to be so vulnerable. Sometimes it's tough to be vulnerable at work, especially with your manager. But having a leader that supports that actually wants to is vulnerable themselves and supports these conversations to understand where you want to go, your direction, and encourages you to go even more than you, like sees your potential even more than you. that's employee development. And that's something that I was grateful to experience, and I really encourage that more than ever with leaders. Yeah.
I echo that. Not all managers I've had in my career have been great, but those that really stand out were the ones that saw things that I didn't see myself and made me see them in such a positive way, and said, and instead of saying, you should work on developing that, or they would say, you're really good at this. Did you notice? How about we have you make you more of this, like make you realize your potential. One, it feels great, but also it's such oh my God, what's the word? I know the word in French, tremplin. It's like you're like they put you on a board and you're like sprung just so high by the fact that you had someone kind of behind you, below you, saying, let me push you a little bit further. Let me, make you take that leap that you don't even realize you have all the potential to actually do. Like, go do it. And that's what a coach really does. They make you realize who you already are, and they help you shoot for the stars. It makes such a big difference. And those managers stand out. Like, I'm sure everyone listening and you and me have the face of that number inside of our head, right?
Absolutely. Everything you're saying totally resonates. Yeah. Yeah. I've had really incredible experiences with managers who have seen that and given you that space to grow because they saw the potential in you. And that's remarkable. If you're able to have that kind of experience of leaders that see that in their teams, that's going to bring businesses forward.
Yeah, and take the time to actually mention that. Like, we're all busy, and you said before, managers are amongst the busiest people inside of organizations. They have so much on their shoulders, but one of their main roles is really developing their talent as best as it can be. It's like understand my team and making it the best team it can be. Some of that is extremely overwhelming because you said it, every person is different, but the impact of just taking that time and naming that strength and saying to your employee, whether it's through Slack or in person or whatever, by email, sharing, I've noticed you've done this and it was really great. The impact that can have cannot be underestimated. So I think, that's a piece of valuable advice for all managers listening, and HR managers and directors listening, coaching your managers to take that time. So how about we end our conversation a little bit on the impact that employee growth can have on organizations? So I want to hear you in your professional opinion. You're a master of this, studied this, you've done the research, you do this for a living. What's the main and biggest impact of investing in employee growth on an organization?
Okay, so there's so many points to mention here. And I guess one of the big ones is when you really think about what jobs look like in the future. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's about 85% of jobs that'll exist in the next 10 years that haven't even been invented yet. When you learn about these kinds of predictions for job opportunities and career trajectories, it means that the future of work is demanding a whole new set of skills that employees today do not possess yet, or most likely don't have yet. And neither do managers and executives. So this is where employee development becomes the most critical for growth of people, but for sure the growth of companies. If they need to nurture their more long-term success, they need to make sure that they're recognizing these skills are needed within to attain their business objectives. So from a purely pragmatic perspective, companies must invest in employee development to just stay competitive in today's work environments. Just for on that note. But there's also, other points too. I mean, we've seen it over and over again, increased productivity. We know that when employees are continuously learning and developing new skills, they become more efficient, more effective in their roles. They can that leads to more productivity. We've seen that when employees are encouraged to think creatively and to develop new ideas, this leads to innovation. It leads to new products, services, processes that can really boost an organization's performance. We've mentioned, already how adult learning has infinite benefits. When you invest in learning, you invest in your employees' mental health and happiness. What better, what more do you want for your bottom line than for people to be happy and to stay? And yet, employee development still struggles to be a priority for many organizations. Executives are trying to understand what the importance of employee development truly is, and so understanding this is a really key part, I think, as we're going forward, making sure that leadership gets this practice and advocates for learning and development and employee growth in general for people and for their own business is key.
Yeah. As you put it, it's learning and development is the driver of higher productivity, higher profitability, more innovation, less turnover. And like, that's a direct correlation to your bottom line. Like, it's a mathematical equation. Why not invest in it? Like, the proof is in the pudding, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Learning is no longer that background, like good to have, should have in the organization. It's really more of an operational part of the driving force of a company or organization.
It's a business imperative.
Yeah.
Simply put.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I don't want to minimize also the impact of, prioritizing growth and development as an organization has an impact on your culture and on your employer brand, your employee experience, right? Do you agree with that? I think you have research to share around that.
There's tons of research on that. We know that learning and development truly makes up a culture. Organizations that adopt a culture of learning are thriving organizations. These are organizations, learning and development programs that are high in demand from employees are becoming one of the top benefits that candidates and employees are looking for their current or future employers. We know that it's a must-have. So yeah, it is definitely a key one. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question in terms of culture of learning. Yeah, so making sure that leaders have, so that organizations have it, and that leaders know how to adopt and how to act, how to have a culture of learning, and it starts from the top.
It does start from the top. I agree. Wow, it brings, I guess, our discussion to an end. We've defined it, we've talked how to build it, and we talked about why it's important and what impact it has. So like, I think this is a wrap for a wonderful, full of energy and insight conversation. So yes, I think the classic applies here. We have to end with a quick vibe check. Now that we've had this conversation, how are you doing, really?
I think you said it. I am actually totally energized. I'm so happy to have this conversation about things that matter to me, at least. I feel great. I'm happy to know that JJ, you're so invested in this, and that there's a whole team of people who are also invested in this. So I feel really good, and I'm hoping to have more of these kinds of conversations.
Well, right back at you. I hope we can have another one of these discussions in the future. It's been great to have you on this series. Thank you again so much for joining us and for sharing your wonderful advice and insights.
Thank you very much, JJ, to the whole Office Vibe team. It's been such a pleasure, and yeah, see you soon.
Do this again, I'm sure.
Yes. Take care.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you so much.